Oh, right. Let's click that. Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, thanks to everybody that has come along today. So Karen and I will sort of be co-hosting. What I don't want to do is sort of make it the Karen and Damian show. Wanted to make it open to yourselves, just to pick our brains while we're here. Just ask us any questions. But I guess just in the first instance, it's nice to see some familiar faces. It's nice to see some unfamiliar faces as well. So welcome to everybody. Just to give you a little bit of our backgrounds, Karen, if you're happy just for me to explain, just
Yeah, of
for the two
course.
of us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no problem.
So I'm Damian Smith, and I'm one of 4 spinal cord injury nurse specialists at the Spinal Injuries Association at the moment. We are hoping to expand our team very, very soon. So hopefully there'll be a couple more of us before the end of the year. But between us, we do cover all of England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And, our roles, we all come from similar backgrounds. My background, certainly as Peggy will know, I was at Salisbury Spinal Unit for 25 years before joining the Spinal Injuries Association in November last year. I was also tissue viability lead there as well. So I don't call myself a tissue viability nurse because I'm not a tissue viability nurse, but I had a very keen interest in tissue viability and sort of took the lead within the spinal unit within that role as well. And off the back of that, between us, we've written a new Neurogenic Skin course, and we've got the very first one being run on Thursday next week, which is very exciting. And I will pass over to you, Karen, because it's much easier, I think, for you to explain your background, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Karen Biggs, and the area that I cover for SIA is the Midlands, South and East Yorkshire and Mid Wales. And then our other colleague, Carol Adcock, covers the North, and Debbie Green covers the South East. So my background is I worked in the NHS for 30 years, and I joined SIA in January 2020. My experience background was working in neurological rehabilitation units, supporting people obviously with the spinal cord injury, but also with traumatic and acquired brain injury as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Damian.
And certainly when I worked at Salisbury Spinal Unit, as being sort of tissue viability lead for the unit, much of my role there, I was community based essentially. I had my office on the spinal unit, but I was out on the road like I am now. I covered from Kent to Cornwall, Channel Islands, Isle of Wight, everything in between. So now I've got a much smaller area. I only cover from West Sussex to Cornwall and the southern counties of Wales, which is a bit, I don't know, it seems a bit odd to me that I seem to have a smaller area, but the spinal units that they sort of, there's 8 in England. If you think that there's 4 of us that are splitting up England, Wales, and Northern Ireland between the 4 of us, we do cover big areas. But my role there was supporting patients in the community with skin issues. I covered everything else as well that goes along with spinal cord injury. But a lot of what I was doing was meeting up with tissue viability nurses, district nurses, helping to support them with, the management of pressure ulcers. And I've often thought myself, particularly when it comes to tissue viability nurses, that surely that's their bread and butter. They are experts in managing wounds, which they are. But I think why they're sort of calling on the support from myself is because when you have a spinal cord injury, there's lots of other factors that can sort of inhibit or slow down the healing of a pressure ulcer, or put your skin more at risk of developing pressure ulcers. And that's something that we're sort of hoping to get across with the new Neurogenic Skin course, because a lot of these physiological changes, and I won't sort of bombard you with lots of anatomy, physiology talk, but suffice to say, your skin does change when you have a spinal cord injury. The way that you have the ability to heal a wound, or your perhaps reduced ability or reduced sensation to sort of detect whether you might have a problem from occurring, not being able to perhaps change position as frequently as you should do. There's lots and lots of different risk factors as to why somebody might develop a pressure ulcer, but there's also lots of physiological reasons as to why, if you get one, it can take that much longer to heal as well. But the reason that we're doing this today is because it's Stop the Pressure Day, and it's an international sort of awareness day. It's not just us, it's happening worldwide. So there's all sorts of initiatives going on worldwide to try and raise awareness of why pressure ulcer management, prevention primarily, is so important, because it's drummed into us that the majority of pressure ulcers are preventable. But saying that, it's still a massive drain on the NHS. And I don't know if anyone wants to hazard a guess, what the cost of a pressure ulcer would be to the NHS. I've got a daily figure, I've got an annual figure as well. So we're not talking pounds, shillings, and pence. It's big numbers, and approximately £2 to £4 billion is spent within the NHS managing pressure ulcers per year. And you sort of break the cost down. The figures that we put out this week, so you can break them down to about £1.4 million per day is spent managing pressure ulcers. And the biggest part of that is, well, what do you think that the biggest part of that is, of that cost? Where do you think that money goes?
Just for the nursing, is it?
It is, yeah, absolutely right, Martin. Yeah, so probably about 90% of that cost is nursing time. The cost of the dressings, dressings are quite expensive, but the cost of the dressings actually make up a minute proportion of that cost. But the biggest cost is the nursing time, and particularly, that can be community nurses, it could be hospital nurses. We know that hospital beds, they sort of carry a cost. There are sort of almost like daily tariffs for the cost of a hospital bed. But I think what we want to try and raise awareness of is the fact that pressure ulcers, they are on the whole preventable, but that's not to say that you can look after yourself in the best possible way and not develop a pressure ulcer. There's always going to be circumstances where it might be completely out of your control. You might think you're doing all the right things, and it can just be an unfortunate series of incidents that can sort of increase your risk of developing a pressure ulcer. And often what we talk about is not just the high risk of developing a pressure ulcer, because once you get one, because your skin heals differently and it heals slowly, and the quality of the skin when it does heal isn't as good as your regular skin, then you've got the risk of that area breaking down again. So it's not just the risk of occurrence, it's the risk of recurrence as well. So that's what we're sort of very keen to make sure that in an ideal world, it's best that you don't get one in the first place, but we do live in the real world, and we know that that's not always possible. But I think certainly when it comes to if you do have a pressure ulcer or pressure mark, early management is absolutely crucial. And I'd much rather any day of the week get a call from somebody and say, look, I've got this pink red mark, what advice would you give me? Rather than thinking, oh, actually, it just looks a bit pink, I think I'll be okay, and maybe just push it a little bit harder, and then that pink mark ends up into a pressure ulcer. And like I say, the quicker you can sort of nip something in the bud, the quicker we can get involved, or other healthcare professionals can get involved, then hopefully we can make life that much easier. And rather than having to sort of manage a much more serious, wound. But another reason, I guess, that, why we're talking about it today is that we have a survey that goes out to all our members called What Matters. And, one of the key themes from the results of that was that, 40% of people said that what sort of caused their major concern was, aging with a spinal cord injury and their skin management. And you all look very young and sprightly on my screen, I must say. First off, I don't want to cause any offence, but certainly as we all get older, there are changes to how our skin behaves. We lose that elasticity. That we have less collagen in our skin. Collagen is what gives our skin that tensile strength and that stretch and resilience. But if you haven't got as much collagen sort of embedded in your skin, then your body's ability to be able to resist pressure is decreased. But there are lots of other factors, and just very simply, we know that if you have a spinal cord injury, it can affect your sensation, which is really your protective mechanism to alert you to the fact that you might have some discomfort. But we know that that can manifest itself in different ways, whether that's increased spasm or increased pain. But there are physiological factors. We know that the circulation can be compromised as well. But we also know that how a wound heals, those components to help a wound to heal can be affected following spinal cord injury. So you might have experienced it yourself already, that a wound below your spinal cord injury will often heal more slowly than a wound above your spinal cord injury, and because of those changes. I'm just having a little look through my notes because I want to sort of involve you as much as possible. I want you to, if you feel happy, sort of share your experiences or ask us questions.
Can I just say something? Is that okay? Yeah,
of course, yeah.
Of course, yeah. So Damian spoke about the cost, financial cost to the NHS as a result of pressure ulcers. But one of the main reasons that we are so adamant that if somebody develops a red mark that isn't blanching, that they remain off it, is because we know the huge cost to yourselves and to family members of you having to spend a prolonged period of time on bed rest. And if we can respond to those early marks, it can reduce the length of time that you may need to spend on bed rest. And for some people, this runs into months and years that they have to spend time on the bed because of a pressure ulcer. And we know how that affects people psychologically, how this changes the role that they can have within their family, within relationships, and has such an impact on their mental health. And so if we can do all we can to not just raise awareness with those that are injured, but with healthcare professionals, and be able to prevent that area of skin breaking down, then that's certainly what's at the forefront of our mind all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And that's a really important point, because in the Neurogenic Skin course, we do talk about, the financial costs. And from my point of view, the financial cost is not that it's irrelevant, but it's not a priority. I think you put the money, where the money needs to go. And, you can put the money into the preventative measures, making sure that, staff are trained properly, that staff have that awareness of what proper pressure area care is. And at the end of the day, what we're talking about is very basic nursing care. We're not asking for anything out of the ordinary, but it is the human cost that I'm more concerned about, and all those things that Karen's mentioned. And I've often felt, in all the years that I've done the job that I do, I've often thought, what's the hardest part of my job? And I think the hardest part of my job is that if I see somebody with a pressure ulcer that's just living their life, managing day to day, to go in and say to them, you need to be on bed rest. And often I get the reply, what, do I need to go back to bed for a couple of hours after lunch? And it's like, well, no, that's 24 hours a day. Sometimes
Damian,
I'm
sorry, Damian, we've got quite a lot of questions coming through the chat. Am I all right to just read a couple out?
Sure. Is it all right if I just finish this point?
Yeah, of course.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So, if someone sort of throws back at me, well, I can't stay in bed 24 hours a day. I live on my own. How am I going to manage that? How am I going to feed myself? How am I going to manage my personal care? We do obviously have to take that into consideration. But with bed rest, depending on the severity of the wound, we could be talking weeks and months, and that's really difficult. When you sort of put it into context, well, if somebody lives on their own, how's that going to make that person feel, psychologically? And you mentioned about mental health. We want to solve one problem, but we don't want to create additional problems as well. So everything has to be balanced, and we do live in the real world. And I think if you were in a spinal injury center, for example, you had a wound, then when I say it's easy, the choice would be much easier to make, to keep you on bed rest because you've got all the support around you that you would need. When you live in the community, things are different, obviously. So, we do have to take that into consideration, that maybe we can give you the advice that, yes, keep the pressure off it, but perhaps look at some of the equipment you're using in order to be able to get up for short periods, to be able to manage your care, or even look at getting some additional care put in as well. So, it's the psychological impact that I think is priority for me when it comes to, dealing with a pressure ulcer. And ideally, we want to get it healed as quickly as possible, identify what the problem is, because if we can identify the problem, then hopefully we can reduce the risk of it recurring. So that would be my priority, really, to try and get those wounds healed as quickly as possible, and sort of limit the impact that it would have on somebody's life, particularly if they're working, or how that affects their interaction with their family as well. So sorry, I'll keep quiet, and we'll go through some of these questions.
So we've got one from Lizzie, who is saying, once it's healed, how do you know whether it's just a scar or whether it's still a mark of concern? Mine healed in August, but hasn't changed much since then. But I still have a red mark and a slight lump under the skin.
Yeah. So what often happens, Lizzie, is when the skin does heal, there are ways to help the skin to heal more effectively. Basically, the 3 key principles to heal a wound, actually, I'm going to say 4 key principles, but the 3 main ones that, you would hear from a wound management course, or, from tissue viability, will be keep the wound clean, warm, and moist, which goes against a lot of the things that, perhaps we learn as kids. If you fall over, graze your knee, and your mum says, oh, you don't need a plaster, let the air get to it. Then it forms a nice big scab, and you pick it off, and then it heals again. You pick the next scab off, and you end up with a nice big scar. But, essentially the skin has healed. But what you've got underneath, you've got scar tissue that doesn't have that collagen, that elasticity. Also, scar tissue will look a different color, and it can take a long time, for that scar. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all, for that scar to return to the same color as the rest of your skin. I've got a scar on the back of my leg from climbing over a wall and catching on some barbed wire. I won't tell you what I was doing. I was only about 8 years old at the time, but I've got a long scar at the back of my calf that I've had since I was 8 years old. It's still noticeable. You have to really look carefully, but that scar tissue is slightly different color to the rest of my skin. As far as the lump underneath, that could just be scar tissue as well, because scar tissue is more fibrous. It's more fibrous. It doesn't have that same level of collagen, that elasticity. And scar tissue can sort of soften a little bit over time, and you can help that along just by keeping the skin moisturized. But when you are trying to heal a wound, quite often, people sort of make the mistake that, once they've got a new layer of skin over it, perhaps they think, well, I don't need to keep a dressing over it, and take the dressing off, perhaps a bit too early. But what I would suggest is, once the wound's healed, just keep a simple dressing on it for another couple of weeks maybe, because there's still a lot going on under the surface of the skin, part of that healing process that's continuing. And if you take the dressing off, I'm trying to think of a suitable analogy here, but if you take the dressing off and that area of skin starts to cool down a little bit, you're taking away one of those key components that's going to get a wound to heal more effectively. So, keeping the dressing on it, almost fools the skin into thinking, right, I'm not quite ready to heal just yet. I still need to do a little bit more under the surface of the skin. So keep a dressing on it for a couple of weeks after the wound's healed. You'll get more effective healing going on underneath, and then hopefully less scar tissue as well. But yeah, it can take a long time for the discoloration to go back to looking like normal skin, if you like. Some people will still have, sort of lumps underneath as well. It might feel a little bit different because of the scar tissue.
So Lizzie's saying then, Damian, does that mean I can start wearing a dressing on it every day? I've been wearing the dressing on the healed wound since August.
I think rather than giving a definitive yes or no answer, without sounding like a politician or sitting on the fence, there are lots of other factors to think about. Depending on where that wound is, if there's direct pressure over it, just to go back to a quote from Ludwig Goodman, and I don't know if you're all aware of who Ludwig Goodman is, but he's the sort of founding father, if you like, of spinal cord injury care. He's a doctor that came to England in 1943 to Stoke Mandeville and revolutionized the care of spinal cord injured patients, to the point where a lot of the principles that he's spoken about are still in place now. But one of his quotes, which we've used in the Neurogenic Skin course, is that you can put anything on a bed sore apart from the patient. And sort of based on that quote, really, if you've got a pressure sore, keeping it clean, warm and moist is essential, but relieving the pressure is also vital as well. But once you've got a pressure ulcer healed, that area of skin's going to be more vulnerable. And if you've had a period of bed rest, then you need to build up your skin's tolerance to pressure. And I would suggest that you do that very, very gradually. And we do have mobilizing regimes, which we can share if need be. But basically, for those of you that have a spinal cord injury and have gone through specialist centres, sort of thinking back to those early days, when you first get up, you're up for sort of 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and slowly build your time up. It's the same if you've got an area of skin damage that you are going to perhaps be sat on. You just need to build up your skin's tolerance over a period of time. Because if you get up too quickly, that vulnerable area could either break down or it's not going to be as resistant to pressure, and you might still get your skin looking a bit more pink than it should be after you've been up for a while.
And I think as Lizzie has just said, Damon, she said that it's in the ischal area. It's also really important when you do develop a skin mark that's red, or you do develop a pressure ulcer, to actually consider what the cause of that pressure ulcer is. So, for example, if somebody's had a pressure area on the ischal area, the buttocks area, then actually to think about how long have you had your cushion in your wheelchair? Cushions in wheelchairs don't last forever, and to consider whether you need to have a review of your cushion, whether you need to have a review of your seating, so to have pressure mapping undertaken, where I'm sure you've all had pressure mapping carried out, where actually and a device is placed under you to actually see on a screen which area are the hot spots of pressure that through your seated position. And so, I mean, wheelchair cushions, we have a lifespan of about 18 months to 2 years, Damian?
Yeah, it depends what they are. Some of the basic foam ones, they might not even last 6 months, but some of the I say sort of more higher tech ones, they might last, a year, 2 years, 3 years. If it's a Roho cushion, which is one of the air cushions, they could essentially last forever as long as they're not punctured. But the important thing is, if you've got a pressure relieving cushion, to have an idea of what its lifespan is, and knowing how services work. Perhaps don't wait until the end of your cushion's lifespan before requesting a new one, because it can take a little bit of time to get a replacement. And if you've got any doubts, you can contact us. If I don't know, I've got good contacts that I can ask to find out, what the lifespan of your cushion is. But you've also got to take into account that if you've got a cushion that works well for you, and it's reaching the end of its life, you get a brand new one, you still need to build your time up on that new cushion as well. It's a bit like wearing in a new pair of shoes. They might be a little bit uncomfortable at first, or a little bit tight, or a little bit pinchy, but once you wear them in, they're nice and comfortable, and they're not going to give you blisters. I'm sort of using that analogy, but it might be that you've been using the same cushion for a long time, and you get it replaced, and the properties of that new cushion are going to be a bit different to a cushion that's been worn in.
And we've got another sorry, I'm going back up the list, sorry. So this is from Diana and Richard. Are tiny, hard, almost scabby marks on the surface an indication that something may be hatching? I get these under my ischial bones and they can be there for months, first one side and then the other. If I alter how the cells of my Vicare cushion deal with pelvic oblique, I can't even say it.
Pelvic obliquity. Yeah. So, I'm just reading it again now. So, tiny, hard, almost scabby marks on the surface, indication that something might be hatching. Not necessarily is the sort of the answer for that, really. The fact that they're under the ischial bones, which are the sitting bones, so they're the sort of the bony prominences on your bottom, which are one of the main areas if you're going to develop a pressure ulcer. If you're a wheelchair user, they're sort of one of the key areas to monitor. But if it's just sort of almost dry, sort of callous type skin, that could just be an indication that you've got high pressures over that area, but your body can tolerate it to a degree. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's an indication that there's something else going on underneath. It's probably an indication that there are high pressures there, and just to monitor it. I'm just trying to think, what else it could be as well. If you get, I'm trying to think of sort of other areas, people might get, sort of dry patches on, and I'm thinking sort of more particularly, if you're tetraplegic and you use your elbows to help with your mobility, perhaps, on the bed, the skin can get sort of quite dry and hard over those areas. It might just be, how you're sat on the cushion. If you're moving around quite a bit, it can just be a degree of friction and shear that's just sort of rubbing the skin, and the skin, might just get a little bit tougher. Tough doesn't mean it's more resilient to pressure. In fact, the opposite. You want to keep your skin soft and supple, but we do encourage people to change their position, and sometimes just the changing of position in your chair can just all be enough just to be sort of gliding your skin over the cushion. But I think if it is sort of tiny, hard areas, using a very simple moisturizer to keep that skin soft and supple will just help its resilience and tolerance to pressure. But just looking at the last part of that, so I get these under my ischial bones and they can be there for months, first one side and then the other, if I alter how the cells of my Vicare cushion deal with pelvic obliquity. So yeah, it might just, it would be worth probably, having a proper postural assessment and using something like a pressure map as well, just to see, whether there are any sort of red hot spots of pressure over that area. And if you have got pelvic obliquity, particularly with a Vicare cushion, they're very good cushions to be able to, either add or remove some of the cells to help sort of balance that pelvic obliquity. But if anything's dry, going back to those principles before, keeping it clean, warm and moist, if you've got really dry skin, keep it moisturized. So, moisturized skin is more stretchy, more resilient, more robust, and will withstand pressure a lot more. You don't want to go to the other extreme. If it's very wet as well, you need to protect your skin from moisture. So it's striking that balance really. And we do see a lot of moisture lesions, which, your skin is your protective barrier to stop, pathogens and, all the bad things from the outside world entering your body. If you've got your skin sort of exposed to prolonged moisture, that can sort of break down the skin's integrity. And although that wound might be caused by moisture, if you apply pressure to it, then it has the potential to turn into a pressure ulcer as well. So dry skin, keep it moisturized. If you've got very wet skin, protective barrier creams to help, repel the moisture from the skin surface.
Just another question, Damian, related to pressure mapping from Diane and Richard. And not everyone had pressure mapping, not if not been to a spinal unit. And she has people have got experience of some wheelchair services being able to do pressure mapping and others not. Yeah.
I remember probably, I don't know, time seems to fly by for me, but probably about, I don't know, 10 years ago, when I was working at the spinal unit, I won't name who they are, but, there was a particular wheelchair service, a very, very good wheelchair service, that didn't have a pressure mapping equipment. I used to have my own that I could take out with me. Nowadays, I think it's more unusual that wheelchair services don't have it. But if wheelchair services don't have it, it's perhaps worth contacting the local tissue viability team, because I've certainly come across quite a few tissue viability nurses that have got access to pressure mapping equipment. So yeah, if you can't get pressure mapped by a wheelchair service, then it's worth just exploring the options with tissue viability. If that fails, I guess come back to us and we can put that question out to see whether there are other sources, even if that's just going to the directly to the manufacturer of the pressure mapping equipment, because they'll know who they've who's bought their equipment, so we can perhaps find out that way as well.
Yeah, I have put Damien, I've put both our email addresses in the chat for people if they want to contact us individually after today.
Okay.
Tina's made a point referring to our comments, your comments that and advice you gave about wearing, using a dressing for a couple of weeks after a wound has healed. And Tina's saying, interesting, Dad's district nurse said that no dressing was best. It was a grade 2 sacral that comes and goes.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for us writing this neurogenic skin course is the fact that it's easy for us to get sort of blasé and complacent, because we do have that knowledge of spinal cord injury, and between the four of us, the four spinal cord injury nurse specialists, we've got over 100 years of experience of dealing with people with spinal cord injury, neurological conditions. But I know from my experience that community nurses, they're jack of all trades, and even a tissue viability nurse, they deal with wounds with people with lots of different conditions. We're dealing with people with spinal cord injury. So, we have that more specific understanding of what the issues are. So, somebody that might have sensation or perhaps is more mobile, maybe it's more appropriate to say, don't put a dressing on it if it's a grade 2, but, just to sort of make people aware of what a grade 2 wound actually is. That does mean that the skin is broken. And my general rule of thumb is if the skin's broken, you put a dressing on it, because otherwise there's a potential that you're going to get bacteria into that wound. And those key principles: keep it clean, warm and moist. If you get bacteria into that wound, that will slow the wound down from healing. Not putting a dressing on it, the wound's going to cool down. You won't get as effective healing. I'm very happy to have conversations with other healthcare professionals as to the rationale as to why we recommend things in the way that we do. And when I say I'm happy to challenge people, that sounds a bit aggressive, but I'm happy to question their rationale for why they would suggest one thing over and above someone like myself or Karen, who has that expertise and knowledge about spinal cord injury.
Yeah, and there's a question from, I'm sorry, it's from iPhone. There's no name on iPhone, saying that their dad has been in hospital for a while. He's about to be discharged. He's been in hospital for over a year. He's got pressure ulcers that won't heal. I think to do justice to respond to you, to be able to support you, if we could contact you out of this session now, is that okay? Because there is certainly support and advice we can give, and we can talk about the things that need to be considered whether that's a care package going into the community, or whether that's into a home, into his own home, or whether that's into a nursing home. Would that be all right? I'm not sure. iPhone, I can't see on my screen at the moment. If you can you on yours, Damian?
Let's go on to the next screen.
I'll respond in the chat.
Is it, I can see Paula's iPhone. But yeah, I think that would be the right thing, really, because there can be.
Oh yes, she says it's Rachel. Yes, thank you, Rachel Butler. Okay,
but Rachel, yeah, if you want to contact us, just send us an email or something, then we can get in contact with you and talk that through, because if he's had a pressure ulcer that won't heal, I can certainly look at why that might be, sort of by asking the right questions, and sort of recommending particular investigations, because if you create the right environment, there's no reason for a wound not to heal, if that makes sense. But you do need to create that right environment. There can be lots of underlying issues as to what might be stopping a pressure ulcer from healing, and that's something that often I would get involved with. Even if I'm meeting up with tissue viability nurses to make recommendations for blood tests, X-rays, images, MRI scans, to make sure that we can try and identify what the actual cause is as to why something's not healing in the way that you would expect it to.
Damian, we're asking for a little bit more information. This is from Paul, was injured C78 in 1968, so 53 years ago. The last 7 years developed numerous skin problems. Can we go into more information about aging in skin protection? And he's saying that I disagree, skin problems are preventable.
Okay. What I did say is they're wholly preventable, and there's always that. If you look at the literature, there's over 100 different reasons why somebody might develop a pressure ulcer, and sometimes it can just be an unfortunate series of events, perhaps different or sort of combined causes that, you know, it's completely out of that person's control, you know, for a wound to develop. So yeah, but I would still say that on the whole, most pressure ulcers are preventable. But the reason that they're mostly preventable is if you put all the necessary measures into place. But what you then need is people to be aware of what those measures are. And that's a lot of what we're trying to you know, get across by raising awareness. But as far as aging skin, well, you know, aging skin, again, a lot of it comes down to the fact that skin doesn't have the same sort of elasticity, tensile strength as we get older. There's less collagen in our skin. Hence, that's why, you know, we end up with more wrinkles. Just, you know, wounds will heal more slowly as we get older. You know, I certainly know that from myself. You know, if I get scratched by the cat on my leg, you know, something that would just take a few days to heal. You know, I've got a 3-year-old daughter. You know, she falls over, grazes her knee. You know, within 2 or 3 days, her skin's healed. If I did the same, you know, it would be taking a lot longer. But we do have information on our website, and I've got a load of windows open on my computer at the moment, so I can put some of these links into the chat function. But yeah, certainly, you know, there are sort of very recognized reasons as to why older skin is less resilient. But also, if you have a spinal cord injury, that can be sort of down to reduced muscle mass as well, just from having a spinal cord injury. You know, the way that pressures are sort of distributed through your body, if you haven't got the same sort of muscle bulk, will be that much higher. So, you know, older skin is less resilient to pressure.
Damian, I've been trying to get in on that one. Sorry, I can't type. So I
Okay.
put my hand up and
Oh, so sorry, I've missed that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. It's just very much in connection with what you're talking about, Damian, aging, and it's a big issue. Thank you for saying how young we all looked, but as a 44-year tetraplegic who experienced Stoke Mandeville post Pup Goodman, aging, it's not only, as you say, the loss of muscle, it's the fact that you've had, obviously throughout that experience, you've had pressure marks which create scar tissue and makes difficulty on that basis.
Yeah.
Then also you have, you know, where there's lack of that muscle, the bone is directly on the skin, especially from the ITs, which become a major problem. Wouldn't it be great to be able to pump collagen or whatever, rather than in the face, on your bum and on your hips, which would actually create some sort of padding? I don't know whether the Americans have gone in that direction and identified a way of doing that, but that
yeah.
So it doesn't really matter, you know, how good your cushion is or how many times you're turned in bed. When you actually get to that stage where it is literally just skin on bone, how are we going to deal with that in the future? Because it's going to be a continual breakdown.
Yeah.
Something that takes an awful lot of time and energy, especially when you're full-time trying to work and trying to be involved in the community.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it is a question that I've been asked quite a lot. And you know, people have said to me, you know, can we not have, you know, you can get implants like breast implants, can we not have buttock implants? Well, the reason why that wouldn't work is partly that would be a big operation. You're having to make an incision into the skin to be able to put an implant in, and neurogenic skin. And what I mean by neurogenic skin is, you know, skin that's been affected by nerve damage. If you haven't got sensation over that area, having, you know, something else, another foreign body between the bones and your skin, isn't really going to make a great deal of difference, because you still got that skin that doesn't have sensation. One thing that, because I know you're attached to Salisbury, aren't you, Neil? Yeah. At Salisbury, they've got a very good medical physics team there, and they have done all sorts of research into things like functional electronic stimulation. And a few years ago, and functional electronic stimulation, it's you've probably all seen these adverts for like these belts that you can wear around your waist and to give you a six-pack, basically stimulating those muscles. We know that if you have a spinal cord injury, particularly if it's a complete spinal cord injury, those muscles are going to lose tone, that those muscles are going to atrophy. But by using something like functional electronic stimulation to stimulate those muscles, you can get those muscles to increase, bulk up, which sounded great when they initially looked at the trials, and it did make a difference. But as soon as you stop using that, then those muscles are just going to atrophy again. So it's something that would take a lot of motivation, a lot of perseverance, and to be honest, the benefits aren't really that great.
Damian, with respect, yeah, I mean, that's great for younger guys and things, but when you become 20, 40 years plus, it becomes a major problem about skin and skin protection. And I've been very lucky to have, a few pressure sores that have been very difficult, but dealing with them and having long bed situations in a work, a regular work setup, which can make life very difficult for any of us. But yeah, what is the future for us with the fact that we can't increase that muscle, we can't increase the fat there. There are some amazing equipment and stuff out there, but on a day-to-day basis, what is the answer going to be for aging skin? Is it we just have to take the circumstances and live with it?
I think for the future, we do have a research and innovations group, and I think wound management, because of I mentioned about the cost of dealing with pressure ulcers. It's a big money business, wound management, and there's lots of companies that produce lots of sophisticated dressings, but it's not just the dressings. It's other companies are looking into technologies to see whether there's any sort of biomarkers that can sort of predict whether a pressure ulcer is about to develop. So I think technology will take us down that way. That if we can predict if someone's going to develop a pressure ulcer through, any sort of biomarkers within the body, then we can put the preventative measures in that much earlier. But I think because I know you've been injured I'm sort of looking at you again, Neil. Because you've been injured a long, long time. The choice of pressure relieving equipment from when you were first injured is quite different to how things are now. Technologies behind excuse me, some of the equipment that we have access to is a lot more sophisticated. I think our understanding of not just pressure ulcers, but our understanding of the impact of someone's posture, their nutrition, their hydration excuse me, we're much more aware. And I think having been injured as long as you have, I think you've done extraordinarily well to be as well as you are, because I can pretty much guarantee that when you had your spinal cord injury, I'd imagine there was probably a conversation with your consultant about life expectancy, and that would have been based on the knowledge that they had back then, that somebody with a spinal cord injury that was, injured in the 60s or 70s, their life expectancy would have been X amount of years. Now we know that it's not much different from the regular population. Unfortunately, with tetraplegia, you might shave a few years off, but even so, because of what we understand now about spinal cord injury, we can keep people a lot healthier. I think the way that things are going to go in the future is, maybe cushion technologies will continue to improve, that we can reduce the amount of pressure, between your skin, your bones, your skin, and whatever support surface you're on. My Dragon's Den moment, and I haven't, not that I've sort of thought it through a great deal, but you might think I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but have you come across these mag lift trains that basically they float on, opposite magnetic poles? And I thought, well, if we had somebody with a spinal cord injury had magnetic pants on, and then you had the opposite magnets on their cushion, you're essentially just floating in thin air. So there's no pressure there whatsoever. The best pressure relieving cushions in the world, there's still going to be some pressure there. But I think, technologies will change. And like I say, there is research going on at the moment to predict whether someone's more at risk of developing a pressure ulcer, so that you can put those earlier interventions in place. But if we can reduce the risk of somebody developing a pressure ulcer, keep their skin more intact, there's lots of research going into stem cell treatment that, might even, I wouldn't say turn back the aging process, but might slow down the aging process. And if that can slow down the aging process of the skin, a baby's skin is a lot more resilient than my skin, for example. So I think there are technologies and research going on, looking into these areas. So hopefully, generations to come, pressure ulcers might become a thing of the past. Spinal cord injury might become a thing of the past as well.
Thank you, Damian.
If you got magnetic pants the wrong way, you'd just flip yourself over.
Yeah, I was going to say, Martin's got his hand up there, Martin. Sorry, I've just come to you.
No, I've been starting to get dry, dark patches on one of my bum cheeks because I've lost feeling in that leg completely. Where I used to be able to feel slightly. I started using that cream that you recommended, and the dark patch seems to be disappearing kind of from the center outwards, and they've got like fresh skin appearing in the middle of the dark patch, which is getting a little bit pink.
Yeah.
When I'm back to bed, it's gone by morning. The redness has gone by morning, and I'm not using the cream every day, just sort of bedding it in slowly. Do you reckon that's okay?
Yes, I think so. I think really I would recommend to everybody just moisturize your skin, and I'm
using that cream that you recommended, the
sunflower cream.
Yeah, my trusty one. Yeah.
So without sounding like a salesman, and sorry, Peggy, I know you've got your hand up. I'll come to you just in a moment, but when I first started on the spinal unit back in 1996, we would get, or even before then, to be honest, I was working in elderly care before then, and I'd be looking after patients, very, very, elderly patients, very proud of their lovely skin because they've been when I say plastered in moisturizer, but it's part of their routine to use a moisturizing cream. The drier your skin is, it's going to lose that elasticity. That elasticity, I know I've sort of mentioned it a lot, but that's so important. If you can hydrate your skin becomes more plump. The superficial layer at the top becomes more plump. It's more resistant. So I'd encourage everybody to use a simple moisturizer. And like I say, without sounding like a salesman, my trusty sunflower cream was developed by Salisbury Burns Unit as a treatment for managing scar tissue. And there's nothing fancy in it at all. It's just a very, very simple moisturizing cream. And I wouldn't say that, use that over anything else. But it's the fact that, using a moisturizing cream will just give your skin a lot more resilience to pressure damage.
I have answered it in the chat, Damian. Well, I've been trying to answer in the chat as you've been talking because I realised we won't get through everybody.
Okay.
We've had questions around how difficult it is to detect early skin changes when people have dark skin. So I've just put in the chat about those initial visual signs would be that any area of dark skin that is different in colour to the surrounding area, and that also we have a resource that we can send out to anybody that actually specifically talks around dark skin and the presentations visually at every stage of a pressure ulcer. So certainly by all means do contact us. Would you add anything on to that, Damian?
So as well as just what it looks like visually, and it can be more difficult with with dark skin, to be able to see any pressure damage. But it's also to feel it as well, to feel your skin, to feel if there's any raised areas, or if you've got an area of inflammation. Inflamed skin will be warmer to the touch. So if you've got any sort of hot spots on your skin, any raised areas that you can feel, that might be indicative of early stages of pressure damage as well. So look and feel would be my advice.
Okay, thank you. Lady Marie put something. It's related to your idea and invention for Dragon's Den. How would lack of balance work with that idea, Damian?
So it wouldn't work. You'd flip yourself over. Because as soon as you lean, the magnets would alter, and they'd naturally try and flip themselves back over.
So no, funnily enough, I have thought about this because I would never go onto Dragon's Den unprepared, because I see what a grilling that they give. But what you can do is you've got your magnetic pants on, floating around on top of your magnetic cushion. But if you go on a roller coaster ride and they sort of pull that thing over the top of you to stop you falling out of the roller coaster, you could have some sort of gentle support over your shoulders, whether it's just straps to stop you sort of floating off, flying off. Because for the majority of people with a spinal cord injury, they can still feel their shoulders. So having a strap over your shoulders probably isn't going to cause any additional skin damage. I haven't got a prototype yet, unfortunately, but I'm waiting for investors.
I just want to read out, Damien, sorry, that we've got a lady, Kelly Louise, is joining as an NHS rehab engineer, working for a pressure ulcer prevention service. She has a keen interest because her mother has a T2 complete spinal cord injury. And has pressure ulcers for 12 years. And she is saying she's managed to set up drop-in pressure mapping clinics for her local health board, which is in Swansea Bay, for the reasons mentioned. And people can check their cushions to see if the eye are still working well for them. Other areas may have similar setups, which is true, isn't it? They may do.
It is, yeah. So a good friend of mine works, she's a medical engineer at Salisbury Hospital, and they do bespoke seating, and I'm sure they've got pressure mapping. I know they've got pressure mapping equipment there as well.
I'm just quite a few people, sorry to leave. Tina is saying that we use Aveo too. Aveo, is that how you pronounce it?
Avivo. Yeah.
And Diana Richard was saying
Aveeno.
that when she was used to advise to use Aveeno for scar healing and moisturising when she had radiotherapy, and that was really helpful. There's a few people saying that they use it too. Yeah,
so I can see, but it says, but it's not the cheapest. Really, I think I'm no expert on moisturisers, but I think a good moisturiser doesn't need to be expensive. And certainly, my trusty sunflower cream is inexpensive, and it's been developed by medical professionals as well. It contains no lanolin, no parabens. Trying to think off the top of my head. It's a very simple sunflower cream. You could find it easily just by doing a Google search. Just put sunflower cream and you'll find it. You can get it on Amazon. Just to make people aware that there are hand creams, there are body lotions. There is no difference whatsoever in the ingredients. It's just part of the marketing, because if somebody went into a supermarket, for example, specifically wanted a hand lotion and they only made a body lotion, you wouldn't find it. So they've got, a couple of products, but they have exactly the same ingredients because essentially that they are just simple moisturizers. But, it's been developed to manage scar tissue. We know that when you have a healed pressure ulcer, there's going to be a degree of scar tissue there. So if you can manage that scar tissue, then that skin is going to be more resilient. Graham's put he uses Pro Shield Plus. Any thoughts in relation to moisturizer? Pro Shield Plus is fantastic. There was a time when it first came out. They have the Pro Shield spray wash, which you use to clean the skin, and then the Pro Shield Plus cream to moisturize it. It is brilliant. It helps sort of repel excess moisture. I think it's all got antibacterial properties to it as well, but it can be a bit greasy. That's the only thing I would suggest. But I guess the take-home message will be any moisturizer is better than no moisturizer. Yeah,
I'm just seeing if there's anything else in the chat. So I appreciate we've just come to 2 o'clock now. I can't see anything that we've missed.
What I will do is, because I did bring up, so I'm not very good at multitasking. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put a few links into the chat. And so the first one I put is a Stop the Pressure Day poster that was developed sort of primarily by Karen last year to sort of raise awareness of, Stop the Pressure Day last year. And it's just got some very sort of simple hints and tips as far as what you can do to hopefully reduce the risk of developing pressure ulcers. And, I totally accept that, not every pressure ulcer is preventable, but I would still say that the majority are, but that is down to the right education, awareness of what the causes are, and also, the preventative strategies as well. I'm just going to put this one in as well. I can copy and paste. Some of these, just to give you forewarning, have got some sort of graphic images of pressure ulcers. So what I'm doing is just putting a pressure ulcer categorization poster in there as well. And but what the pressure ulcer categorization poster has got, it's got some good information about what blanching erythema is. And to you and I, it's basically, if you've got a pink mark, if you press it and it goes white and then it goes back to pink, you know that there's a good blood supply there and the skin's sort of relatively unaffected. If you've got a red mark and you press it and it doesn't go white, it just stays red, then you know that the damage to that skin's a bit more severe. We do have a fact sheet as well, which I'll just put the link into the chat as well. So a lot of this information that I'm putting in is really, it's information that is available on our website. So do have a look. But, I opened up another website, if I can find it. From another company. It's called National Wound Care Strategy.net. I think I'm not sure if so I put that in there as well. So there's lots of useful information for healthcare professionals and for the patient as well. But I think, if you've got any concerns, queries, you can contact us. If we can't advise you directly, I'm sure that we'll know who to direct you to. So do I have a link for cushion lifetime estimates? I think I might do, actually, because I saved something fairly recently.
So I've noticed my last few J3s have been appalling.
Oh.
I've had them overfilled and stuff, and the overfill isn't the same from one side to the other. The one I've just got now, the back piece on the coccyx isn't half as full as the old one used to be. The quality control of them has been really, really bad.
And I completely agree with that as well, Martin, because I've known the J cushions for many, many years, and the gel that they were made with previously was a lot sort of more viscous and thicker and longer lasting, and the cushions, the lifespan would be sort of 3 to 5 years. You'd be the fluid now in those gel cushions is a lot thinner and more fluid, and
I'm lucky to get a year out of one.
Yeah, and although the company themselves will deny that there's any change, we know that there is.
Yeah, definitely is.
So I'm having a little look. I will try and find it. But I think, if anybody's got any queries about, the sort of longevity or the lifetime of their cushion, just, do get in touch with us. But a sort of basic rule of thumb is if it's a basic foam cushion, it might not last more than 6 months. If it's a bit more sophisticated, most cushions would have a lifespan of 1 to 2 years. I think even the J cushions, which are, the sort of high end of the pressure relieving cushions, arguably, 1 to 2 years. But if it's a Roho cushion, which is one of the air cushions, or a Starlock, which is another air cushion, as long as the cat doesn't puncture it with their nails or the dog doesn't chew it and and they burst, then they'll last forever, or they'll last a long, long time. But it's how you look after the cushions as well. The gel cushions, the gel does need a bit of pummeling just to sort of redistribute the gel. Some of the cushions, I'm thinking of a Verilite, where you have to open the valve to let the air in, then you sit on it, let some of the air out, close the valve. It's a bit of a technique to it. If the cushions are well maintained, that will prolong their life, but it's important to know how to look after them as well.
Damian, I'm really sorry. I just want to apologise to everybody that I need to go now for a reason that Damian doesn't know about. So I don't know if you are going to be carrying on for any much longer, Damian, or are you going to be drawing it to a close?
I think I will need to draw it to a close, I'm afraid. But do you put our contact details,
yes,
our email addresses into the chat?
I have, yes.
But if I'm not sure whether that chat's still going to be available once we close the session. But what I would suggest as well is if you go onto the Spinal Unit's the Spinal Injuries Association's website, and I'm just going to click on it myself just so that I can give you the right information. If you click on Get Support and then go on to Skin, to be honest, wherever you go on the website, generally you'll find a button that says book a call with our nurse specialists. If you click on that link, that'll open up a page where you can just fill in some basic information that comes through to our generic inbox, and then that just gets filtered out to the right nurse for your area, and we'll happily answer any queries from there. And I'm just having a little quick look at the chat box again. So got Daniel, clinical educator, Enviva. Just wanted to know how often you have this cafe and do you cover other topics? So basically we run these cafes on a alternate weekly basis. Today's Thursday, but generally they're on Wednesdays every other week. The only reason we got today's on a Thursday is because to coincide with the Stop the Pressure Day. And we cover all sorts of topics. We cover anything that's related to spinal cord injury, but we also do have guest speakers that come in to cover various topics, and whether that's sport, leisure, social, yoga, breathing exercises, pain management. We're very much down to what it is that you want from us, and we can help facilitate it through the cafes. So we do run, we cover various topics. So I will draw the session to a close. I'm really pleased to see so many people that have attended today. It's really good to see. It's nice to see, that there is the interest as well. And, hopefully you've got something out of it. And I'm just looking at Tina's little boy.